Good afternoon. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Penn School of Nursing. I'm Tony Villaruel, and I'm the dean here of the school. It's so fabulous to be here in person, to be here for this wonderful event. How many of you have been on the Zoom calls or in the Zoom meetings before? Great. Well, it's nice to, we couldn't see the little Hollywood squares with you beforehand, so again, it's great for you to be here. I know many of you have been on this revival series with us, and I want to thank Sandy and her husband Joe for the generous donation. And again, it's not only the donation, but it's been the fire and the spirit and the prodding and I want to say pushing, but the pushing in a gentle way. I feel like I've been on this revival without the psychedelics. My mind has been opened and lots of exploration here. And again, Sandy, thank you for bringing this opportunity not only to Penn Nursing and to our students on campus, but again to this whole community here. I think this far exceeded any expectations that we had. And to the audience, we're not done yet. This is just the start of this here. So we've all been dedicated and inspired by those who have shared their experiences. And again, we're grateful to our panel who came here with us today to share their stories with us as well, too. I think it has really worked to humanize and to put in context why this work and why these opportunities are so important. So I think after being on this journey with us, there's no doubt that the psychedelic therapy has important use in mental health treatment, and I'm happy that Penn Nursing can be part of this component here. I like to pride myself that Penn Nursing has a strong innovation ecosystems that prepares nurses to be leaders in healthcare. And again, very appreciative of the engagement of our students throughout the process here. And you'll be hearing from one of our students who's getting herself all ready for the Zoom screen, Kayla, who will be moderating this discussion today. So our program here, in particular our psych mental health program, offers a holistic approach that blends neuroscience and psychotherapy and psychopharmacology. In addition to our psych mental health program, we have great experts like Dr. Salima Magani, who is a leader in end-of-life care and who, again, is working with us to understand how this will work and be made available to people who are on this journey. So again, Salima, appreciate your support and your support of Kayla here as well. I also want to thank Kwasi Adusi, who has been sharing his expertise and helping us develop the nurses. We continue to be grateful to him for his expertise and for shepherding us on. So tonight is going to be the culmination of the previous 6 sessions, and we will hear 5 personal stories of transformation led by Kayla Baker. And so without further ado, Kayla, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean, for being here tonight, for supporting this series, and of course, for your inspiring words. As the Dean mentioned, my name's Kayla Baker. It looked like we saw a lot of hands in the audience for people who had watched the series. So I did moderate 2 of the series sessions, so I won't reiterate about myself too much, but I was an oncology nurse prior to coming into this program. And I read some of the research about how psychedelics were used for oncology patients experiencing existential distress. And even though I didn't come into this program with the intention of studying psychedelics, things sort of evolved that way. And I was really lucky to find support in Dr. Magani, and we've been sort of exploring this more. So I'm happy that Penn Nursing has this happening, and I'm happy to have you guys all here tonight. I am just going to do a quick little recap of some of the virtual events that led up to this. Just as a reminder, our first session was with 2 nurses, Dr. Maria Mangini and Dr. Stephanie Van Hope. And in that session, we just talked about a general introduction to the psychedelic space, and it was great to have those expert voices there. We're lucky enough tonight to have Dr. Stephanie Van Hope here with us. So thanks, Stephanie, for being here. The second event featured Andrew Penn, also a psychiatric nurse practitioner in this space who's really doing a lot for psychedelics, really bringing the nursing voice to the table. And that session was moderated by Pat Chow, who's also here tonight. So thanks, Pat, for being here. In our third session, we talked to Dr. Ben Malcolm, pharmacist, really important role. He talked about neuroscience and pharmacology, and that was a great conversation. In our fourth session, we talked to nurse Karen Cooper, and that session was moderated by one of our Psych NP students, Tanya Gertzman, who I hope is also here tonight. Tanya? Yes. All right. Great. In our fifth session, we talked to Dr. Stephen Ross, Dr. Scott Shannon, and Dr. Rachel Yehuda about the future of psychedelic-assisted therapy. I know we have Dr. Ross in the house tonight. Thank you for being here. And Randy Malski, who introduced that session. And our last virtual event was a panel of leaders in the psychedelic space, Joseph McGowan, Dr. Hannah McLean, Rick Dublin, and Leah Mix. And they talked about where psychedelic therapy is going. And so I believe we have Dr. Hannah McLean here. Hannah? Not sure. But anyways, hopefully we'll be seeing Dr. McLean at some point. Steve Akpon was not able to make it tonight, but I do want to mention that all the short videos that featured transformations by individuals who had used psychedelic therapy, those were made by Steve, and they were just moving and wonderful. It's always great to see even just a snippet of somebody's personal transformation. So I want to thank Steve for his creativity in those videos. So without further ado, we have more stories tonight. And so I just want to also mention that after this session, we are going to do breakout rooms. I'll give more instructions on that later. This is just a little overview of what we're going to be doing tonight. So we have about an hour here to hear from our speakers and also to do Q&A. So as the speakers are telling their stories, think about some questions you have for them, and we'll be sure to leave plenty of time to get your questions. We definitely want to, we have a smaller crowd, so we definitely want you guys to feel comfortable with standing up and asking your questions, especially while you have such a wonderful opportunity. So, without further ado, Jessie Gold, former Army Ranger, and the founder of the Heroic Hearts Project, which supports veterans with PTSD. John Kostakopoulos, a participant in an NYU trial, and also has a nonprofit, which is aimed at, trying to mitigate the mental health crisis. Dinah Bazer was also a participant in an NYU trial as part of her cancer journey. Jonathan Wilson, former Navy SEAL, and he also has a nonprofit, and so he can talk more about that. And his lovely wife is also here and accompanying him, and she has a nonprofit as well, which supports military spouses and widows and female veterans. So, Jessie, you're up.
Thank you so much, and thanks everybody for being here and joining us on Wednesday. Can you hear me if I speak like that? Okay. So thanks for the introduction. Really happy to be here, and it's so cool to be at such a great university like University of Pennsylvania talking openly about psychedelics. And if you realize, like, even 5-6 years ago, that would be virtually impossible. So it's a pretty amazing thing that we're having this discussion. So my story relates to this. I was an Army Ranger, which is a special operations unit in the U.S. Army. I was a non-commissioned officer, so I was a leader of many junior Rangers, both at home in training and then overseas in combat situations. During the time I was in, it was mostly Afghanistan focused, and so I did 3 combat deployments to Afghanistan, various parts. And so when I got out of the military, generally speaking, my military career was very fulfilling. I learned a lot about myself, challenged myself, and was excited to go into civilian life. I had already a background in economics and finance, and I thought I was going to hit the ground running. And at first, it seemed like I was. I found a great job in finance, and on the outside, everything was green check marks. I was doing well, had the good job, had a good social situation. I was in Tampa, Florida, had friends. But on the inside, there's just this burden. I've called it a dark cloud that I just couldn't overcome. And I thought it was just something that, kind of the military in me, I could just kind of storm past or just keep hitting that wall until it broke, because that was how I was trained. But little by little, it just kind of kept having more deleterious aspects in my life. And I think because I was high performing, it lasted even longer where, I could show up to work and do well and get compliments, but then I'll just go home and just drink until I passed out. And then, that became more nights than not. And I just found myself in this depressive spot, this very anxious spot where panic attacks would come, where I was relying on alcohol so much just to survive. And I'm fortunate that I saw the red flags, right? I saw this. And so I tried self-help. I tried, all these sort of stuff. I would wake up at 5, do journaling, all this kind of, and meditation. And I went to the VA. And unfortunately, the VA was just very sort of dogmatic about talk therapy with prescription medication. And so there I was in this situation where I knew I was struggling. And my two options were continue on with my self-medication with alcohol or go on to this SSRI path, which I had seen sort of the negative sides of it as well. And not to talk bad about medications that, there's a time and place and they can definitely save lives, but for me, it was just this one or the other. And so I just found myself where I was labeled with PTSD. That didn't seem to really encompass everything I was struggling with. And even the professionals didn't have any sort of help. The prescription model is really sort of a maintenance thing of you have PTSD, you're probably gonna always have PTSD. Here's how you can live life, And that wasn't acceptable to me. And so continued to just sort of trudge along and live unhealthy life, and heard about ayahuasca. And at first, heard on a podcast, it was kind of a curiosity of like, oh, that's an interesting trip in the woods. Never done psychedelics, didn't personally identify with somebody that did psychedelics. It was like, okay, that's for other people. I have no need for that in my life. But it was just that fortunate time of things aligning where I was just going downhill quick, and there was this thing that presented to me, and for whatever reason, the smarter part of my brain that, I didn't even realize was there, the unconscious, just kind of had that sort of repeat, ayahuasca, till eventually I just found myself booking a flight to Peru, and I couldn't really explain it to anybody else. I kind of kept it sort of low key, but I just knew whatever I was doing in Florida was not sustainable, and I wasn't happy in any sort of aspect, and so I just took a leap of faith. Essentially bought a one-way ticket to Peru, found a place I felt comfortable with. It was a week-long indigenous ayahuasca retreat, so multiple ayahuasca ceremonies, and dove right in. And it was one of the most challenging things I've ever done, but towards the end of it, it was just the immediate sort of realizations were one, that this was not what the DARE program had told me drugs were, right? This was not what... It wasn't fun, first of all. It was the opposite of what I was expecting a psychedelic journey to be, just throwing up each night for the 5 hours. But two, there was something profound to it. There's something really deep to it, and I noticed immediate benefits in terms of, for the first time, it felt like my brain was on my team as opposed to actively trying to destroy me or fighting against itself. And two, over the course of months, I just notice extreme reduction in anxiety, in hypervigilance, in just sort of me not going to sort of magic bullet scenarios to try to fix my life. I had much more restitution. I was much calmer. I was much more focused in moving forward. And all this led me to found Heroic Hearts Project, because even when I was going, this was 2017, this year's our 5-year anniversary, there just wasn't any framework, really no talk about integration, and so what I was lacking, I wanted to provide for other veterans, including the education. Not that everybody should do this, but hey, if you're looking, if you've tried everything else, there might be another tool out there, and let's explore it together. And so that's what we've been doing. We developed a program where veterans come to us and we provide integration coaching, support, preparation. We use retreat centers of not only ayahuasca, but a variety of different psychedelics depending on where the person's at, and then the follow-up care and preparation. And beyond that, we've been doing a lot of policy initiatives around the country to sort of push forward, talk to legislators about this, and then also research. So we're working with a few different universities around the country to really push forward the scientific literature on this. And happy to dive into any of those, but really happy to be here, and thanks for listening.
So much, Jesse, and we can just keep going down the line. John, you're up.
Oh, great. Can you guys hear me okay? Or? Yeah, okay. That was great, Jesse. Thank you.
I've said it for 5 years.
Yeah, we got some great panelists on here. And thanks, Sandy and the Dean, for having us. So I'm John. As mentioned earlier, I was a study participant at NYU. What they were looking for to research was alcohol use disorder or alcoholism. Prior to that, I had tried everything to stop drinking, and I really wanted to stop. But I just couldn't. I would, go maybe a few weeks or a couple of months and then relapse. And, even if you want everything in the whole world, you want it to stop. Addiction is a very, very tough disease to get over. So I checked myself into rehab when I was 21. I tried everything. I tried different pharmaceuticals and abuse that would make you sick when you ingested any alcohol, and a few others to help curb the craving, but none of that worked for me. So just by luck, I tracked down Dr. Steve Ross, who's in here, probably one of my favorite alums to come out of this place because he saved my life. And he was working on launching a clinical trial to treat alcohol use disorder. And prior to that, I was terrified, just like Jesse, never touched psychedelics, wasn't for me. And I was also just flat out terrified. I didn't want to have a bad trip. I thought maybe I could go crazy if I had too much or get stuck in a trip, and the doctors assured me that wasn't the case, and you'll be fine. So after a very intensive medical screening, I was lucky enough to get in, and I got lucky again because it's a double blind, and I got the psilocybin, and then I got lucky again because I stopped drinking after my very first session. So this was back in 2015, so it's about 7 years, and I haven't had the urge to drink. It's not like I'm counting days, or that's what they do in these addiction programs. You count days, you have a good support group around you. But I didn't need to do any of that since leaving the clinical trial because, I don't know if you get upset about this, but I think, because he doesn't like to hype things up, Dr. Ross. He's a very responsible guy, and I don't blame you. That's what drew me to this study. I was like, all right, they're not selling snake oil here. But, this flat out cured my alcoholism. And, there's no other way to put it. I had a burger and a non-alcoholic beer at the White Dog right before this, and not once did it even cross my mind to order a real beer. And back in the day, I probably would have been like, maybe I could have one or two, do this talk, maybe just get a hotel room, in Philly before I head back to New York and keep drinking, and then go back to my normal life. But that didn't even cross my mind. That's how well this worked. So, if you have any questions about that later on, you could catch me on the second floor or something, whatever. You got me there.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I now have
Thank
Tina.
you.
Dinah.
Thank you for hosting this and giving me the opportunity to tell my story, which is similar to John's story. And I also was in a psilocybin study with Dr. Ross. In January of 2010, I found a hard lump about the size of a walnut in my abdomen, and I said, this is going to kill me. I know what this is. And it took me 3 months to find a doctor that took me seriously. Fortunately, he was at NYU, and I went in for surgery and expecting to come out and being told I had a few months to live, because by that time, this walnut-sized lump was the size of a grapefruit. Instead, I woke up to be told it was stage 1C ovarian cancer and we can cure this, which I knew wasn't exactly true. But then I went through 6 rounds of chemo, and I just kind of powered through it like, I have to do this, and it's going to be okay. Nothing bad is going to happen here. And luckily, nothing bad did happen. I thought I would celebrate when it was over. No, when it was over, all of a sudden, I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop. When is this coming back? Most of the time it comes back in the first 2 years. And so every exam, I thought, oh, this is it, this is it. And meanwhile, I was totally consumed with this fear and this anxiety. Every day, every night, that's all I thought of. Every little stomach rumble, oh, it's back. I was living in terror constantly. When I went in for my 2-year exam, that it really had peaked at that point. And when the nurse practitioner asked me how I was doing, I said, great, except for this anxiety is killing me. And she said, I have something for you. And she told me about Dr. Ross's study. I felt very lucky to get into it. I did the required 16 hours of therapy, which I don't recall as therapy, but just getting to know the therapist, but I'm assured it was therapy. And the format of the study was dose A and dose B, one of which was the real thing and one of which was a placebo. I went in for dose A and knew pretty quickly that it was the real thing. So I put on a face mask and the headphones to listen to the 6 hours of carefully curated music, and was thrown into such chaos and terror, I thought, oh God, it's a bad trip. And I had had a bad trip when I was young. So I remembered that my therapists were with me, and I stuck out my hand and I said, I'm so scared. And one of them took my hand and said, just go with it. And then I was floating in the music. And after a while, I saw my fear as a physical thing up under my rib cage. And when I saw that, I was so angry. I just exploded. I said, what the fuck? Who the fuck do you think you are? I won't be eaten alive. Get out. And the scene changed, just like that. It was gone. It was gone. And I was floating in the music, and I was feeling love. I was feeling the love of my adult children, the love of my husband, the love of my friends. I was bathed in God's love, which, as an atheist, and I still am, was truly remarkable, truly remarkable. When I surfaced from this, my daughter accompanied me home in a car service, and I said to her, it wasn't real, was it, God's love? And she said, no, Ma. She's also an atheist. But in Harry Potter, he sees Dumbledore after Dumbledore has died, and he says to Dumbledore, I'm going to paraphrase, this is all in my head, isn't it? And Dumbledore says, yes, but that doesn't mean it's not real. This experience was real. It took place in my head, but it was real. I really felt God's love, even though there's no God. So, I'm sorry, I do need notes. Afterwards, everything slowed down for me. I had always been a very anxious person and a very speedy person. I would grab a piece of toast with peanut butter and coffee and race off to work and have my breakfast in the car. Now, I wanted to sit at home and eat my breakfast and have my coffee and read a little bit of my paper and drive to work casually. And that's what I started doing. And I began making time for myself to live my life and feel every moment. I reconnected with friends that I hadn't seen much over the past years. I joined my local Y and made new friends there. I had been a somewhat aggressive driver. My husband may say it was more than somewhat. That seems to have been really cured. My mantra is, you are not in a hurry. I don't worry about the cancer. I really have not had one iota of anxiety about a recurrence. It's been 10 years since I took psilocybin. I've had a few times when I thought I need to get this checked out, and I did. I just went to a doctor. I had blood drawn. I got it checked out. Wasn't worried about it. About 1.5 years ago, I accidentally found that I had a different cancer. And I didn't freak out. I just, I sought out an expert. I got that treated. It was very extremely early, slow growing. I had some surgery. I go in for a checkup once every 5 years. I guess we've done 2 now. And I don't think about it. Other anxieties have crept back into my life, but this, it's gone. This is just gone. My life is completely changed. Thank you, Dr. Ross. Thank you for hosting us and giving us the opportunity to talk about this.
Thank you, Dinah. That was wonderful. You definitely put a tear in my eye. I'm appreciating that you each have a very different storytelling style. So thank you all. And Jonathan, you're up.
Thank you. So bathed in God's love, and I don't believe in God. I think that's really, how do you follow that? And I do need to verify, has she toned down the driving? Is it? Okay. So we're on to something here then. Jonathan Wilson, I am Allison's husband, father of 5. As mentioned earlier, I was a SEAL. And how do we normally describe who we are? We start with our accolades. So let's do that. Navy SEAL, Goldman, Harvard, Oxford, husband, father. I'm a pretty badass, right? Like, not at all. Not at all. All that was chasing something that I didn't even realize. And it was planted with my father, who I love to death, but I didn't realize what I was doing. I was seeking his love. I was trying to win his love. I'll start with the SEAL teams. I deployed 4, 5 times, and Iraq, Afghanistan, and what we do there is we compartmentalize. So we do what we have to do. It's the mission, it's the job, and you compartmentalize and you go to the next thing. So I've buried a lot of friends. I've been to Arlington. I've been to a lot of cemeteries. We have a lot of widows that are part of our tribe that we stay close to, and it's all normal. It's normalized in our community, but it's not normal. So then you move on, and it's time to transition. You have a wife and kids, and you can't keep doing this. We've been lucky, and we've been lucky. Again, we've lost a lot of friends. It's time to get out. How do you get out? How do your skills translate from being, a Navy SEAL, which is a lot better than an Army Ranger, by the way. Just want to throw that in there. to this outside world, and the reality is you don't know how to. And I was lucky. I had a friend that was at Goldman and made some synergies between being a trader and being a SEAL, and oh my gosh, was I way off base. I thought like the high risk of trading and high risk of being a SEAL is what I needed. It's not what I need. I need purpose. I need passion. I need love in my life, and I just didn't realize that. I didn't have mentors. I didn't have friends outside of the SEAL team. So my time at Goldman was quick. I did a few years there and started a nonprofit in 2012 with my beautiful wife to help these veterans transition, and that started us down another journey of trying to understand these pains and traumas that were accrued during our time in war. And in our relationships, by the way. And in 2017, on that journey, 5 years after starting the nonprofit, we were helping with education, so partner with Harvard. I did try to partner with Penn, by the way, but they didn't want any part of that at the time. Maybe we can have a conversation afterwards. Okay. But partner with a bunch of great universities to help with scholarships and job placement and communities around the country and getting these SEALs and their spouses eventually these amazing jobs, but they weren't okay. And it would implode in due time. And in 2017, that's when we woke up, when a friend of ours, senior SEAL team 6 member, got on FaceTime with his wife and shot himself. And we took a step back, and we realized we're missing the mark here. We need to address these internal wounds that we have, these emotional wounds that we have. And how do we do that? No effing idea. We don't talk about our emotions. Our mantra in the SEAL teams was suffer in silence. And it got the job done, and that's exactly what it needed to be. But on the outside, we had all these things inside of us, just compartmentalized, waiting to implode. And it did time and time and time again. So 2017, we lost a good friend. We started exploring what was out there, inevitably landed on psychedelics. And how that happened was I was going through my own struggles. Had gotten out, was trying to figure this out, to be honest, I felt self-loathing. I felt worthless at times. I had gone from being at the top of my game to just going through the motions, addiction, so drinking, not realizing the amount of alcohol that we were consuming, and the relationship was non-existent. So I have 5 kids, as mentioned. They're amazing. I have one at Trinity right now, and the youngest is 11. I left my family because I thought it was her. I thought it was them. So I left my home, got an apartment, and started for the first time in my life thinking about taking my own life. Oxford, Harvard, Goldman Sachs, Navy SEAL. That's who I really am. That's who we really are. I think it's time for us to start having a real conversation, an honest conversation, so we can start addressing these issues. I came across a friend who was kicked out of SEAL Team 6 for drinking, which, holy crap, if you get kicked out of SEAL Team 6 for drinking, you got a drinking problem, because we all had drinking problems. I didn't even recognize who he was. He looked beautiful when he got kicked out. He was 270 pounds, obese, flush, red, and when I saw him, he was glowing, 170, 5'7", just long, flowing, golden hair. I was like, who is this guy giving me a hug? And then he tells me who he is, and I was just dumbfounded. And then he proceeds to tell me about psychedelics. The seed was planted. I thought he lost his mind. I left that barbecue and got on the internet, started looking into this, started looking at the research, started scratching my head. Wait a second. This isn't the psychedelics that I remember from the 60s and 70s, what's been portrayed by society. There's something here. So I gave him a call a few months later and did my own journey, and it absolutely saved my life. It saved my marriage. I'm a father, I'm a husband. That's who I am now. That's my priority now. And it's not perfect, it's not a panacea. Let's be clear about that. You don't go there. There was struggles, and oh boy, was there struggles during that journey. But it was meaningful, and it was needed to get me to where I'm at today with perspective and understanding and empathy for the first time in my life. With love, to be honest with you, self-love, which has allowed me to amplify that out. I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to have been exposed to this, and now the mission that we're on, trying to help others with this. And maybe at that point, I'll turn it over to my wife for her to share her portion of the story.
Okay. Gosh, see, I should have gone before him. My name's Allison Wilson, and like Jonathan said, we have 5 children, 11 to 21. He mentioned a lot of our life in the SEAL teams and how we started a nonprofit in 2012. And, I always said to him in the very beginning of starting that, I said, if you don't support the spouses or the family at home, it's never going to mesh. It's taken quite some time to get to this point, but starting with, I'll just kind of start with my own journey. The SEAL teams it's really tough. Military is tough either way, but in the teams there was something about these guys that they did. They always had to portray this hero. And everyone would say to me, oh, you're married to a Navy SEAL, you're married to a Navy SEAL. And I was like, oh, gosh. This is not, like, when he told me he wanted to be a SEAL, I was like, what, you want to be an animal? Like, what are you talking about? I had no idea, no military background. And we met in Annapolis, and I just had no idea how hard it would be. He was gone 300 days out of the year. We now currently live in our 20th home. And, again, 5 children, 5 beautiful children. But it's really hard on the family. And that's kind of what was missing in all of this. The guys seemed to get a lot of the support. And when they came home, they really didn't have support for the family. There are a lot of, we can have a dinner here, a dinner there while the guys are gone, but it was a lot of just kind of bad-mouthing them, and I can't believe they left me, and I can't believe this, and you kind of got to the point where you didn't really want to go to them anymore, so you felt really alone. When Jonathan was deployed, I used to definitely numb myself with alcohol. I was on benzos for 16 years. I, then started abusing the benzos, because every night it was, okay, if I can get to bed tonight and wake up in the morning, then that was a good day. You stop watching the news. You don't know if you're going to get a knock at the door, knowing, saying that your husband's not going to come home. But then you start thinking, like, maybe I want to get that knock on the door because I don't want to live like this anymore. And then how awful I felt for feeling that way. Like, I actually want this to end, because then maybe I could move on with my life. The command used to tell us, you have to hold it together at home. You have to hold it together at home, because if you're not together, then the guys are going to be bad operators. And that, frankly, that sucked. Trying to be a mom to 5 kids and hold it together and shove everything down inside. And when I went into the marriage, forget about the traumas that, everyone has trauma, and forget about the traumas that happened to me when I was younger, or that happened to me when I was a teenager, because that had to be shoved so deep down inside that I had to be able to just hold it together on the outside. And I held it together by benzos, antidepressants, and alcohol. And that was it for 16 years. Jonathan, like he said, when we just moved to Colorado recently, but we were in Connecticut for 5 years before that. When we got there, he moved out to an apartment. And, it broke my heart, because when he got out, I said, oh, it's my turn. It's my turn to finally live. It's my turn to hold down a job, to be able to find friends, to be able to maybe go back to school, to be able to be in a home and it feel like a home and not just a house. And it wasn't that at all. It was me picking up the pieces, because he didn't have his purpose or his passion. But like you said, on paper, all of these things. But we tend to forget kind of what's right in front of our faces. And I was not a good wife. It was a very volatile relationship. Again, still running on medication and alcohol. And he, about 4 years ago went to his ibogaine journey in Mexico and came back changed. But I was not this ball of love to come back to. I was mad. I was angry. I was resentful. I was hateful. I said, why do you get to feel this way? And what about me? And then I started feeling even more awful because I felt that way. So it was like the team's all over again. It's like, what is happening? When am I ever going to get off this hamster wheel? And it was, I wanted nothing to do with psychedelics, nothing. I said, this is bullshit. Like, I need to take my medication. I went to the psychologist yesterday, and she told me I just need more. So that's what I'm gonna do. I can remember the day like it was yesterday. We had a small farm in Connecticut. I was sitting in our horse's stall and just broke down and called him and said, if you don't get me on a plane soon or call the doctor soon, then I'm not sure if I'm gonna make it till tomorrow. I had thoughts, constant thoughts of killing myself in many, many different ways. But I also had 5 beautiful children and a husband and this beautiful home in Connecticut. We had everything. So, kind of kicking and screaming, he got me on a plane to Costa Rica. I almost didn't get on the second plane.
Or the first.
And I went to Costa Rica. The universe works in incredible ways, because the 2 women that I went with, one a Gold Star wife, she lost her husband, and one a former veteran and also a SEAL spouse, were the 3 women there. It was the first women's retreat that this group had, but I was scared shitless. I took forever, one, to get to Costa Rica, And then we had to take this little bitty plane, and I hate flying, to our spot and then drive 2 hours to the jungle somewhere. And I could remember the day that we took the medicine just thinking, what the hell am I doing? Like, I have 5 babies at home, 5 kids at home, and I am in the middle of the jungle where I don't know anyone, about to take drugs. What am I doing? But I had gotten to the point where there was nowhere left to go. So it was just, I have to do this. Leap of faith, I have to do this. Like, what else do I have to lose? I did MDMA and psilocybin, both together. The next day, I did 5-MeO-DMT. The first day, when I did MDMA and psilocybin, MDMA is very much a heart opener. And this isn't like the ecstasy that you go out and take at raves. It was with a doctor, and we had a huge staff of coaches and therapists and doctors there. And my ego was so large. Mind you, I had to taper off of my medication, before I got to this point. So I wasn't in a good spot at all. And I can remember laying down. They had us on 3 mattresses, the eye shades, the music. And I can remember laying down. We were outside. You could hear the birds. You could hear everything. It was beautiful. But I can remember crossing my legs, and I kept saying, no, this isn't working. This isn't working. This isn't working. And it was like the control freak in me and the ego. And then I kept hearing this voice, and she kept saying, Mommy, Mommy. And I was like, what is happening? This is my kids trying to talk to me. What is happening? And she just kept saying, Mommy, Mommy, I'm okay. I'm okay. And I sat up, and I have since tattooed, but I wrote hope on my arm. And she was the little girl that I had had an abortion when I was 17. And she came to me in that journey, and she just kept saying, I'm okay. You can let go now. And it's like she just opened up this door of love. And I had not thought about this in years and years and years. And it was shoved so far down inside that as soon as that door opened, it's like she took me through the entire journey of my entire life. And the coming out of that journey, I knew that I had to love myself. That was the entire journey. I had to love myself. I did not love myself because of what had happened when I was younger, and it just kept piling up and piling up, that I never, ever let anyone, mostly my husband and my children, love me, ever. I had a wall up the entire time. And I will say it just like these other panelists will say the same thing. That journey saved my life. It saved my children's lives. It saved my marriage. But remember, it's a tool. This is a tool to get you to fast track where you need to be. But these tools, you don't come home and you're changed, and it's this, you are integrating into this beautiful place, because the world doesn't change. The world still is shit sometimes. And I always said, you know what, I feel like the world should have to integrate to us. We should all take psychedelics, the world integrate to us, and we should not have to integrate to the world. Because there is so much more work that has to be done. I have since, in 2 years, done a few smaller journeys to help me when I get stuck in a spot. But that is the start of the integration process. It allowed me to love myself so I could react to things differently, so I could see love differently, so I could accept love differently. That's what it allowed me to do. On that journey, I was also told that I should start the Hope Project. I came home, hit the ground running, which they tell you not to make any big decisions in the first 4 to 6 months. So that was very purposeful for me. I needed to kind of step back and integrate myself. But in the last about 6 months to a year, the Hope Project has really picked up. It's a nonprofit, now that I have made it my purpose, my passion to connect other spouses, other female veterans and Gold Star wives to psychedelics, but to also be there for them with prep and integration coaching. We work closely with Heroic Hearts and help the spouses as well when their husbands go to journeys. So, you know, I love being here, that we're at, you know, University of Pennsylvania, and being able to talk about this openly, like Jesse said. And, you know, I just want to thank all of you for listening to our stories.
Thank you all. Hello? Oh. Thank you all so much. I just think there's something about sort of talking about the most challenging moments in your life and the most transformational and, you know, important and, you know, good moments in a way, all in one story. So I think it just speaks to the real complexity, you know. Speaking as a nurse, I think there's a lot of overlap with, for sure, you know, the wife of a person in the military, and maybe even just being in the military yourself. I mean, I don't know, I hate to compare it, I don't want to marginalize anybody's experiences, but, you know, when you are close to other people suffering, you know, it can really affect you. So I don't know if any of the other nurses in the room share my feelings on that, but I want to open it up now for Q&A. So, you got a question? All right, I'm going to come up to you. Everyone get your questions ready. We have about 20 minutes. Yeah, or you can tell me. Oh, yeah. Do you want to speak? And just for everybody to please direct your question. If you have a question for a specific person, just let us know.
Sorry, I had to make a joke because I always have a question. But I'm in the psychiatric nurse practitioner program here at Penn, and actually have been on my own journey of being very against psychedelics, and now like slowly actually opening my mind up to them. So I identify with everyone who's had that. But my question is, Allison mentioned this a bit in your bit. I'm really curious as to whether you feel like you have to repeat these experiences and go through that whole ayahuasca journey or psilocybin journey, and if so, how many times do you think you'll have to do it? Is there a point where you're like, I definitely need to go do that journey again? Or is this like a one and done, like cure-all kind of feeling? Thanks.
Go ahead. I think it's so different for every person. I really do. I've heard both. Personally, I had such a transformative first larger journey that I really haven't had to do another one of those. But again, I do think that, I know this sounds kind of crazy, but I feel like it really calls you, and you know when you're supposed to go do another journey. There are some people that I've worked with too, some women that have dealt with a lot of trauma, like military sexual trauma, and a lot of trauma that it just, that tool is to kind of, open up that first layer, and then they continue on the integration process, and then maybe in 6 months to a year, they do have to do something else to kind of really hit that trauma. But I do think it's dependent on each person. I don't know, like you guys.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Sometimes some people we see, they have it, they have a powerful experience, they hit the ground running, that's all they need. Some people have layers of trauma, complex PTSD. A lot of veterans have childhood trauma, which then makes them more susceptible to PTSD or seeking out traumatic situations that add on to that. And so sometimes they might need, one session, they'll uncover some things, and then another session that they might uncover other stuff. What we sort of push is, if you're going to go back, go with intention, know why you're doing it. If you just repeat the same sort of thing, then it becomes a dependence and it doesn't become a healing modality. But I also think this is, with psychedelics, with all of our sort of rethinking our perceptions on what we thought we knew, whether it's about drugs or mental health, it's sort of an opportunity to really reassess how we treat mental health. And in my mind, we've really kind of been kind of dogmatic about treating it almost like a physical ailment, where you have this is the protocol, this is the diagnosis, you do this, 6 months, you'll be good to go, right? Mental health is a lifelong journey, a lifelong check-in. Even all of us, it's not like, hey, I'm done drinking alcohol. It's days, you have bad weeks, you have bad days. You slowly but surely build the infrastructure around you to where it becomes easier. But it's part of that community. And so in my mind, and how we work with veterans, is the psychedelics allow an opportunity to better know yourself, better be aligned with your intuition and emotional intelligence. And so if you use it to that goal, then you'll have a better sense of if you might need it down the line, right? And that's this whole thing. If we can empower people to be better arbiters of their own health, their own mental health, then that's a situation where they're not as dependent on the doctor or that. Maybe they need to do periodic check-ins. And so that's kind of what we see is like, if people do go back, not guilt them in that, oh, they're doing this, but enforce what's your intention of going into this? Are you doing it with set and setting? And then I think that is the ideal healthy situation for the individual and for moving this forward. And that takes a more comprehensive understanding where the person's at in their healing journey versus kind of, using sort of the diagnosis of depression, all that kind of stuff as a starting point. But where's that person at? Like, what's going on in their life? Because a psychedelic's not going to cure everything. If I go to an ayahuasca retreat, go right back to the bar and eat, McDonald's every day, I'm not going to be a happy person, There's so many different layers of it. And so these are tools that really empower us to better know ourselves. And I think that's the rethinking of this, of better self-knowledge, better community support of that self-knowledge, and then rebuilding sort of this thing where I think we've kind of lacked as society in terms of how prominent mental health issues are right now, not only in the veteran community.
Thank you. Really appreciate your sharing with us today. Certainly want to have further inquiry about the transformations you've actually experienced, perhaps things you might have now realized politically or perhaps ecologically, or things that you might want to recognize being in the military or an atheist or a former drinker, to the degree of absolute direct turn, or like there's systemic trauma going on here, or I no longer will participate in this or this political thing, or if you could just expand a little bit other than your personal. Thank you.
I'll share a bit. I think I'll be general, but what it allowed me to do is to somewhat hover over myself and see from a different angle the conversations, the relationships I had. So it allowed me to see a different perspective that I never could before. Very stubborn-minded, or my thoughts were, facts in my head at times, and really had a hard time taking other people's opinions and thoughts. And even to some degree, didn't show them the respect to, or create an environment for them to share theirs. So again, generally speaking, it's allowed me to recognize we all come from different places, backgrounds, we have different experiences. We need to respect those as a collective and understand how we can push forward together. And I can kind of see that now. So I appreciate other people's opinions and try to create the environment now where they appreciate ours as well. So speaking generally, not avoiding the political questions.
I'd agree with that. It gave me, at least for addiction, or at least my addiction, I had a subjective point of view on it, where I would always justify my drinking. I mean, I was pretty young. I was 25, so I always gave myself plenty of time. I said, I'll clean my act up when I'm 30, 35, 40. So I was always justifying my drinking, making excuses. And to echo what Jonathan said, it gave me a different perspective and more of an objective point of view, that I wasn't just harming myself, I was also harming my loved ones that cared about me.
Hi, I'm Taylor. I'm also in the psych nurse practitioner program with Sarah. I can testify. She's a question gal. Thank you guys so much for sharing your stories. One thing I want to hear about, not from anyone in particular, is, you know, we know that in individual therapy that as one person changes, the whole system can change in terms of like your relationships and your families and work. And so I know that we heard a little bit a lot from Jonathan and Allison about your guys' relationship, and like, you know, Jonathan came back and Allison, you're upset, and kind of seeing his transformation. So I'm kind of curious to hear like how your systems might have changed based on your guys' kind of dramatic changes within yourselves.
Sorry if I could go. Yeah. So I've tried quite a few things in the past, antidepressants, SSRIs, to deal with some of the war wounds and honestly some of the childhood trauma that I didn't even realize I had. I mentioned, a few earlier, but a lot of my experience was centered around that. So my childhood, and again, I go back to is like when I did my journey, I thought I was going to spend a lot of time focusing on what I did in war and what I saw in war, and the friends that I lost, and that's not really where I spent time. But I share that with you because I've done TMS, I've done, talk therapy. I could barely last. I think we did a session where I was so anxious, like literally left. Things just didn't work. And when I came back from this, it's pretty damn obvious that something had changed. I knew, but for her seeing, I'm on the 6th iteration of this, like, oh boy, here we go again. This one's going to either fade off, like the TMS, the magnetic stimulation, or some of this other stuff. And with time, it's kept going and a little bit more. And it took about a year for her to get to that spot that she described in her opening comments. But it is contagious. Like my favorite quote is, "You're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with," right? Like it's super contagious, and you can see it. It starts with your transformation, and people see it, they feel it, and then they go off and they start doing their own research. They planted the seed, and then they go do their journey potentially. And if they don't, that's absolutely fine too. But they're intrigued and they're having conversations, and we're sitting in a room at UPenn talking about it now. But it just keeps going. And then for us, it went over to Allison, and she mentioned, I'll let her talk a little bit more about what she's done. But I mean, the women that she supported is it brings me to tears hearing some of these stories. And dozens and dozens of women now, and the transformation that's going to have in their household and their relationships and their children. It's just so beautiful to be a part of that. But I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, it's very generational too. I feel like personally with my kids, like they would even notice, like, "Mommy, like, why you're very happy today?" Or they would say little things, and they'd see us joking around. It's funny because now they're like, "Are you guys talking about mushrooms again?" I'm like, oh gosh.
Shiitake mushrooms.
Yeah. But it's very generational. I think, and also with the, what you said about the therapy being, a community too, that's like what we're trying to build with these nonprofits is these communities, because it does go from person to person. Most of the women that I coach, that their husbands go through, they now have seen such a change in them that they want to go on their own journey. And it's such a beautiful thing to watch when, both spouses have done journeys on their own, and then they're able to come together after that. So, I think it is just about, it's, building this community as well, and with the support too.
Yeah, I'll just add on quickly. Trauma really begets more trauma. Like when you're in an unhealthy spot, you attract unhealthy people and vice versa. And before I went on this, I was just yelling at the sky of like, why can't I find a good relationship? But now reflecting back, I was on Tinder and I would go to bars and try to pick up people at bars. And then, of course, what am I going to find? Other people that have drinking problems and are in the same sort of boat. It's easy then, but when you're in it, it's so hard. You can't see outside of this traumatic bubble. And then after I did some of this work, I wasn't healed at all. It took more work. But I finally wasn't self-sabotaging, right? I was finally a little bit healthier, and lo and behold, I met my now wife, and we have an amazing relationship because it's one of those things that a lot of us don't feel that we deserve it, and it's one thing to intellectually know you deserve it. It's one thing to say, yeah, I love myself. It's another thing to feel it and embody it, and not only know it intellectually, but subconsciously and on all levels. And when you do that, you find those other people that can see that, they want to love you, but they also love themselves, and it creates that. One of my favorite stories of a veteran we worked with, Green Beret, came in like, formidable kind of guy, it's scary if you saw him, very straight-faced, went to ayahuasca ceremony and like almost immediately turned into this like goofy hippie kind of person, and he said he went back to his like goofy self, pre-military, like high school, and his relationship didn't end up working out. It had done its course, but they both maturely left it because they started really talking, and they didn't just. But the story he had was just one morning he was with his kid, and they were just making pancakes, and he was just telling me how he enjoyed that, and where before he'd be kind of military, like, hey, you gotta get to the bus, all right, hurry up, eat. Whereas this, he was just like relishing in enjoying the time with his kid, and like, hey, if we miss a bus, I'll drive him there, whatever, and just to think about that, how generationally that affects people's lives. Like that kid now has a better loving relationship with his father, which allows him to understand that schema so that he can then have that with his children. If he doesn't have that, then he's always going to be searching that, and that's going to reflect in his children and their children. Generational trauma is such a real thing and such a hard thing to break, and we see that with abuse. We see that, like I said, so many people who join the military and have PTSD come from childhood abuse or chaotic situations, and it's this cycle that just keeps repeating. And so that really is the power here of actually effective modalities where you can break that cycle, bring it to both sides of the spouses, and then, if the kid down the line wants to do it too, they have that option, but at least for they have those schemas of loving, healthy relationships.
So Dinah, I think Dinah here, I'm down here. Hi.
Oh, hi.
Thank you all for sharing. I think, Dinah, you were probably the only one that talked about the therapist in the process of, quote, the journey. So I'm wondering, to all of you, how did that play into what you did? We saw the psych nurse practitioners here, and so that's a certain place for them. But tell us a little bit about that, and then what happens after this journey? I mean, is there a need for continued, I don't know, call it talk therapy, or is it this own community that provides support? You talked about, when you need to go on another journey, but what's in between? Because I don't think you're talking about this as a magic bullet. I think you're talking about this as a process. So maybe if you could expand a little bit about what happens after.
Yeah. Well, the therapists were really essential for me. I was concerned about a bad trip, even though people I know in my family have done shrooms and said, you won't have a bad trip. I was concerned. But going in there and knowing my therapists, Anthony Bossis and Michelle Michonne, so well by that point, I really felt safe. And like I said, when I was in this terrified state at the beginning and I didn't know what was happening, I remembered they were there and I reached out to them. And so I think that enabled me to progress in a helpful manner during the trip. I would actually really like to do this again. I don't feel like I need any help with cancer anxiety. That, I feel like, yes, that was one and done. I'm just not concerned about it. But the next day, and for a good 2 years afterwards, I was so relaxed. It was so wonderful not to feel anxious about everything around me. I'm an anxious person anyway, and the way I deal with that is by trying to control things. And that gets on my family's nerves. And so, what Jesse said about intention, I think I need to formulate an intention if I want to do this again, and I actually have an opportunity to do it again. But what would my intention be exactly? It seems a little amorphous to me to just say, well, I'd like to reduce my general anxiety. I have anxiety over my grandchildren. They were preemies in the NICU. They're 4.5 and doing great now, but I worry when they come home from school, being taken on the subway, the platform's so narrow. It goes on and on. Who doesn't worry about climate change? Now we have Ukraine. It's like madmen are in charge of the world. I'm anxious. I would love to be able to deal with that. So first I need intention, and then I need someone to do this with me that, I think would be the ideal person, and I don't have that person. As much as I have my family's love, I don't have that person. So that's where I am with this, but I do think it's a very individual thing.
Can I? So we, to touch on that a little bit too, we have coaches that we work with, the same as Jesse's nonprofit, that did go through a coaching program. And the coaching program's just for to work with their clients on pre and post integration. At the actual journey, you will have either a nurse or a doctor there usually, and sometimes not, sometimes just coaches, but a lot of times these coaches will come from a therapist background as well. And with the Hope Project, we usually set up everyone with 5 sessions. Right now, we're trying to build a program that's larger, so they will do a month of one-to-one coaching before their journey, which will do, setting intentions, which will talk to them about diet, which will talk to them about set and setting, kind of what place to be in, emotionally, if they can get there before they get to their journey. And then afterwards, they'll have one-to-one coaching for 3 months. So it's, it is a continuous program. We're definitely trying to build that, but also the biggest thing I think around psychedelics is community too. So, we will have weekly calls with all of the women that have gone through our nonprofit, and they'll be able to hop on a Zoom and just see some faces or talk to people that have gone through this before, and just kind of get some questions answered from some coaches that have been doing this or therapists that have been doing this for a long time. During the journey, it's very much, I coach a lot of the women on when their husbands come home. It's called holding space. So they, a lot of the times people allow the clients or the patients to be in their own journey, and they just kind of hold space for them. They can hold hands with them, like Dinah mentioned, just for them to feel safe. They can also just kind of just sit there and really hold the space for them to feel comfortable in that set and setting so that they can be on their own journey. There's definitely journeys that have been tough. Like with my journey, I know I had to talk a lot. So, we kind of went through coaches. I had to get everything out. People use journals during their journey to do that. People, might need to just be just them with themselves or in a group setting. So it's very different, but we definitely make sure, I know that we like to have that support for them before and after too.
Sorry to break in. I know we have so many questions and I hate to interrupt. I do want to say that we are going to be moving to breakout rooms in just a minute, so hang on to your questions. You're going to have time to ask them and have more discussions. After the breakout rooms, we are going to have a little meet and greet down here with some refreshments, so we're going to keep the conversations going. So definitely don't feel like your questions are not going to get answered tonight. I do want to thank you all for sharing your stories. Thank you to everybody who asked questions. Definitely take those questions into the breakout room. Thank you. To our speakers, we are so grateful to have you here. And on behalf of the Dean and the School of Nursing, we do have a small token of appreciation for you. I skipped some of my slides here. I feel like I'm going to be the Debbie Downer, but I did just want to say that I might fall in the bucket with, Dr. Ross. I think it is important to keep in mind, that this is still science and research. Of course, some of these substances are still illegal, so we just want to say that, we're not necessarily endorsing these, but I'm glad that we're here having the conversation talking about the promise and the perils. I think it's important to hear your stories and kind of understand one side of it, and we'll keep doing the research to understand more. So the breakout rooms are going to go until 6. If you feel like things are wrapping up early, feel free to make your way down here to get started with the mixing and mingling. But we will have about 40 minutes to do that. We have some School of Nursing students here, obviously, so if you're not familiar with the School of Nursing and you don't know where the breakout room is, we are going to identify some people that you can kind of follow along. So I think, Pac, you were going to go up to, let me go to my, here we go, so we know where we're going. Pac, where were you headed? 207. So if anybody else is going up to 207, you can follow Pac right here. For the PTSD, depression, MDMA, we're going to stay put. So you can stay right here. Is anyone going to room 219 who's from the School of Nursing? Okay. If you're going to room 219, follow Ivory right here. And then room 205, I believe, Dean, you were going to be going to that breakout session. So if anybody is not familiar with the School of Nursing building and you are going to that breakout room, you can follow the dean. Enjoy your breakout sessions. We'll see you back down here at 6, and we have your gifts here.